Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. On today's show, I have George Grosman. I hope I said that right. We're going to talk to him in 1 second and confirm that. But born in Prague, Czech Republic. He's now in the U.S. But he's lived in Canada, Iceland, the U.K., Israel, and of course the Czech Republic. Educated at Guildhall School of Music in London and at the University of Essex. He's based in Central Florida, a good place to be right now. Where he really relocated in 2011 from Toronto. He's active in the jazz music scene. He's participated in the Beaches Festival at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa, the Royal Ontario Museum, the Toronto International Jazz Festival, various different venues. He's been on the radio in multiple cities, worked on cruise ships, played in coffee houses, and a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know how much we're going to talk about music. We're probably going to talk more about the current state of affairs of the world and so on, but we'll see what happens. His work has been curtailed by COVID, of course, but we're going to talk to him and find out more. But if you want to start your own podcast, all you podcast listeners out there, Get a Grip Studios has been in business for 6 years. That's right. We've been producing podcasts here in Toronto, remote or whatever you call it, virtual before virtual was a thing. That's right. So you don't even have to be in Toronto to use our studio. Go to getagripstudios.com. That's getagripstudios.com. Scotty, both Scotts, both of my producers are named Scott, are here to help you out. So again, getagripstudios.com. What's up, George?
Everything's really good, Michael. Like you said, it's nice to be in Florida. Just a tiny little correction, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not your fault because everybody says Grossman, but it actually is Grossman because there's only
Grossman.
one S in the last name. Yeah.
So I want to dive right into it right off the bat here because I read one of your tweets about a Substack piece that you're going to put
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
and on the differences between communism and Nazism, or communism,
Hmm.
fascism, particularly the Nazi version of fascism that you're going to
Yes.
discuss, and why our current state of affairs has many of the hallmarks of communism. Tell me a little bit
Mhm.
more about that.
Well, I think it's maybe a good um, starting point to say that I was born in what was then a communist country, Czechoslovakia. I was born in Prague, and I lived there until I was 15 and a half, and left when the armies of the Warsaw Pact, led by the Soviet Union, invaded the country to put an end to what we call the Prague Spring, which was it was still communist, but it was a liberalized version of communism, which probably would have led to something like a open voting system and the end of communism, which then happened anyway 20 years later. And the Soviet Union put an end to it. So that's the starting point. So that's where I was born and raised. I lived in many different countries, right? In Canada, 1980. You told the listeners all about that. Now, we can start from the point of not necessarily just straight out calling it Marxism or communism, although I think we're heading that way, but saying collectivism. The idea that the collective takes precedence over the individual, which goes against everything that the United States stands for, also goes against what Canada stands for. Uh, the freedom, the liberty, the innate freedom and liberty of each individual. So collectivism is, let's first think about all of us and then think about Michael, right? Whereas the way that we look at it is we first think about Michael, and if Michael and George are doing well, and their neighbors are doing well, and their neighbors are doing well, then the collective will do well. And if you take that as a starting point, and you believe, as I think Justin Trudeau definitely believes, and he's not ashamed to admit it. In fact, he he advertises it. And if you believe that you have to do everything for the collective, then it kind of can roll over into a much harsher state of affairs, such as we see in Australia and New Zealand already. which is very close to Marxism. And in fact, and again, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I mean, the Prime Minister of New Zealand expressed her admiration for China, and 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 so did Justin Trudeau, admire the Chinese methods, etc. So that's what I would say about communism. Now, I think the whole idea, how is it different from fascism? We can discuss that, and those are just kind of my. Uh,
Well, let me throw something at you. Okay, because
Go ahead.
I think about this a lot, and I sell light bulbs. You're a jazz musician, so what the hell do we know
Yeah,
anyway? But we're allowed to say our opinions about this sort of thing, right?
yeah.
So I've talked to a lot of people recently about this, and I try to explain it to them like this: if a society was 100% capitalist, all the federal government would do is enforce private property rights. That's it.
And defense.
And defense, foreign affairs,
Yeah,
and defense,
uh,
and private
right,
property rights. Okay.
right, right.
Socialism, which is also often mixed up into Marxism and all this sort of stuff, socialism and capitalism are like, socialism is a part of capitalism. And the difference
Hmm.
between the Democrats and the Republicans, or the conservatives and the liberals, is how much of the capital you're going to tax or redistribute. So
Yes.
socialism is an outgrowth of the capitalist system, which says we can't have all the gains of capital going to the owners of capital. And so there's a bar where we redistribute that capital to create infrastructure, society, schools, whatever you want.
Yeah.
And the
Hmm.
argument between Democrats and them is where that bar goes. How far do we go
Hmm.
with the bar, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
When I try to talk to people about communism, I put it this way. I say communism is the removal of private property rights.
Yes.
That's all really you need to know. That you no longer are allowed to own anything,
Right.
and the government owns everything, and the
Hmm.
government is in charge of production and the needs of society and creating different things. Fascism is the implementation of private property privileges. So, what happens in fascism is that all the industry has a default setting of serving the state, right?
Hmm.
So in the
Hmm.
Nazi state, IG Farben or whatever these companies,
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
different companies, yeah, or even Hugo Boss, who made the uniforms for the SS, say for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah. Yeah. BMW.
they,
Yeah.
they're allowed to, yeah, exactly. Well, these companies are allowed to earn profits and are allowed to have the privileges of private property, but the government can withdraw them at any time if if they don't like what the company is doing, or the company's not willing to work on behalf of state goals. And
Yep.
so I try to explain that to people, that's kind of your, difference 101 between these typical systems.
Hmm.
And when people say to me, what do you think this is, communism or fascism? I come back to them with this. I say, do you think China is a communist country or a fascist country? And everyone says it's communist. But I actually
Well, yeah.
think, hey, I actually hear,
Go
and
ahead.
I'm going to give you a moment because I had to
Mhm.
unpack all that so that we
Yeah. Yeah.
understand where
Yeah.
we're coming from. I actually think China went from communism to fascism with Deng Xiaoping in 79, where
Hmm.
they said we're going to have state capitalism, which
Yeah.
sounds eerily similar to National Socialism, if you know what I'm saying, where we're
I
going to
do.
allow private property privileges, but if we
Hmm.
don't like what you're doing, we're going to take them away, which is exactly what Xi is doing right now in China.
Hmm.
He's
Hmm.
removing private property privileges from various companies. And
Hmm.
if you ask people who are Chinese, I know I'm in the lighting business, a lot of Chinese manufacturers, they say there's no rule of law, there's the rule of China.
That's the
And
rule of the CCP. Yeah.
yeah, that the rule of China, which means that,
Yeah.
we can take this away. There's no private property rights. It's
Hmm.
privileges granted to you by the state. So when I
Yeah.
look at it that way, to me, what's happening in the world strikes me to be more like fascism, George, than it is like communism.
So there's a lot in there.
Yes, I
Um,
give you a lot.
uh, um, we can start from the end.
Okay.
Uh, what got me when COVID started, I don't know how you reacted, but I reacted like I think most people reacted, which is it was fear. And we didn't know what it was that was hitting us. We didn't know how powerful it was going to be, how widespread it was going to be. We heard rumors. And so I kind of went along with the narrative because why wouldn't I? Now, in the back of my mind, of course, I knew from the last 3 or 4 years being in the States and seeing the onslaught of hate against Trump, that you certainly couldn't trust much of what you saw on TV. But you saw these horrific scenes from Italy, and then later from New York, and obviously from China. From China, I didn't care what I saw from China because it doesn't matter. What you see from China is what the CCP will tell you will see, so you don't take it seriously. But then you saw these scenes from Italy and New York. Anyway, long story short, uh, maybe around the 25th of March 2020, towards the end of the month, I came upon an article by the Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben, who writes very eloquently about medical fascism. He called it hygiene fascism, which I like. I mean, it is medical, but I like that expression, hygiene fascism, because that really ties in with the Germans very, very neatly.
For
And
sure.
I thought, yeah, yeah, and because they were hygiene obsessed, yeah.
Yeah, Hitler was
Uh,
totally disgust sensitive. He wanted to clean everything,
oh no, yeah, I know,
including the
and
genes of his people.
yeah, I mean, I read everything there is,
Sure.
about Hitler, so I'm with you. Um, so that kind of, oh, okay, well, he's definitely got a point. What's going on, but I think that it's not quite as clear cut. Some of the Eastern Bloc countries allowed some private enterprise, okay? Soviet Union did not, but some of the Eastern Bloc countries did. Some more, some less. Hungary, for example, you could have a small store, you could have a little tobacco shop or a little deli restaurant, all the way back right after 1956, I believe, when they had their revolution, and the Soviets kind of went, well, okay, we'll let you, we'll give you a bit of leash. Um, so it's not quite as clear cut, even though your point is well taken, of course, and therefore, under the German version of National Socialism between 1933 and 1940, let's say 39-40, the bulk of the German people had more freedom than Canadians have now. Okay, they have they had a easier life. There was no. In fact, the economy was very good. You know
It
all of
was an
that. I don't need.
economic miracle. It was an
It was a
economic
miracle,
miracle. Yep.
right? Okay. Well, yeah, but, paid for very dearly, but yes. Um, so I think there's a lot of overlap. The methods that the governments are invoking, the collectivist methods, okay, in Canada, US, all those countries, they sound like the editorials of Pravda
Mm-hmm.
that
Okay.
I read. I mean, you can take a Biden speech and you can literally, I mean, if you just change a few words, where he talks about the threatening of the people, the we must do it for all of us, we're all in it together.
Mm.
Um, all these slogans. Wait, the one where farther apart, therefore more together, or some crap like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Double
Which
speak.
yeah, double speak. You've seen that on billboards on highways.
Yeah.
It's straight out of Pravda. You had like on in Czechoslovakia May 1st. That was the Communist Labor Day. We had to, well, not so much me, but my parents participate in these parades. And you had to, because if you didn't, your neighbors could snitch on you, just like today
Mm-hmm.
you have snitches.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and everybody had a little lapel pin, and then up on a stage high up, probably at least 40 feet above you, were the functionaries that were going, like this, and forever with the Soviet Union. And a lot of these slogans that I hear today um, remind me of the communist slogans. And now, of course, there's so much overlap that it's very difficult to distinguish. I think that because I come from the communist side of things, I kind of tend to hear and see
Hmm.
what I saw as a kid and equate it. But and plus we don't know how far. Oh yeah, one more thing. Uh, you're talking about private enterprise. What is happening in a lot of instances is the private enterprise is no longer private enterprise. It's either completely taken by the government or it works for the government, like you said. So in like the uh, I call them the digital oligarchs, right?
Hmm.
You can compare those to the fascists, like we said, to the BMW and the IG Farben and all those. They work. They kind of work with the government. I think the difference now is that they're doing it willingly and joyfully.
Hmm.
I'm not sure that everybody at Mercedes was necessarily doing it joyfully, but I'm pretty sure that at Facebook everybody's doing it joyfully. So there is that overlap, but you also have a lot of push towards kind of nationalizing, where the government wants to own everything. They want to run education. They want to run, healthcare. They want to run. They want to put their dirty fingers into as much of your life as they can and run it. So there's a lot of overlap, and I don't know what to call it, but I think your point about China is definitely well taken. It's certainly not Mao. It certainly has gone the other way, and I think it's just of my perception is colored by my experience.
Yeah. So I think, totalitarianism has a lot of
Yeah.
things in common, right? So if where you have, the hegemony of the state over its own people. So yeah, so there's, I think it's something new though, and I'm going to throw an angle at you, and I want you to tell me what you think of this. Um, the past movements, of total, whether it's Pol Pot, whether it's, Stalin, whether it's Mao, or Hitler, or, Mussolini, any of these movements, they were very masculine in their energy. Okay, very
Ah. Yeah.
militaristic. Okay, so there's
Mm-hmm.
a big element of
Mm-hmm.
military there. There's the element of coercive force, not
Yeah.
coercion, not indirect coercion, but straight up
Oh
coercion
yeah.
using military force. Okay, so there's this masculine element. They're very, very. It's the evil king, that's in charge. If you read the Bible, the good kings and the bad kings, and it's one of those
Yeah.
evil kings that's taken over Israel for a time. There's almost like the evil queen. This is more to me, if you want to go Jungian or something. There's a maternalistic suffocation that's going
Mm-hmm.
on, where the state has decided that instead of protecting rights and freedoms, we must keep our people safe. And that's
Yeah.
not a masculine
S-
value.
No.
It
No.
seems to me like,
Safetyism. Yeah.
yeah, we're dealing with
Yeah.
the evil queen, not the evil king with this.
True.
And it's like the
Very good.
suppression. Now, when I say masculine versus feminine, I'm not talking men versus women. I'm talking the
I understand.
expression of the evil feminine, which is crushing
I do.
and never wants to let her kids out of her home and won't let their kid climb a tree in case they fall out of the
Mm-hmm.
tree. There's something to
Mm-hmm.
this that is deeply feminine to me that I don't think
Yeah.
we've seen in history before.
Uh, I That's absolutely. I agree 100%. Um, the safetyism, the obsession with safety, which in the United States is I mean, again, we can't really say United States. I live in Florida, which is really not that way, but the overall kind of the fear that started probably in the mid 90s, and then of course 9/11 brought it to a peak. And then after 9/11, I mean, we're still taking our shoes off at the airport. I'm convinced we'll be flying with masks 20 years from now. Not me, because I refuse to fly with a mask on. So, I'll be driving without a mask. But you're absolutely right. So safety became, and I know what you're talking about, the masculine force and the feminine force. I completely understand, and I agree. Um, the idea that you cannot let people out of your sight, because
Yeah.
something bad might happen. I maybe you read that piece, but in one of my pieces, I actually compared. I said, as kids in under the communist regime, we had way more freedom than kids have now. I'm
Hmm.
talking way more. Listen,
Sure.
I was born in 1953. So let's say when I was 10, 1963, that's only 18 years after the end of World War II. So we would bike out of town, and we could bike it to a field that had unexploded ordnance in it. You know,
Yeah, sure.
uh,
For sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
I mean, we could. I mean, I've seen it. I mean, no, nothing. Not gonna work. Nothing happened to any of us. But I mean, it was there, and there would be. Nobody said anything. We'd bike across railway tracks. Without helmets. We did anything we wanted to as children. Uh, was the regime oppressive? Of course it was. Uh, but in its later stages, in the, let's say, in my experience, in what from 66, 7, 8, it was far more free than where you are living right now.
For sure.
I mean, what's happened in Canada is just shocking.
It is.
I lived in Toronto for 30 years. I'm a Canadian. I'm a dual citizen, but I have a Canadian passport and I'm a U.S. citizen. But I used to love to come back to Toronto. I always thought it was like the best city in the world, and I've traveled all over. I would go to London, and I love London, and it's where I spent my student years. But in the 2000s, it was dirty and expensive, and I would go out for sushi, and you pay like $40 for a plate, 2 inches big, and so I come back to Toronto, and it was paradise. So I am shocked at what has happened in Canada. Maybe I'm going a little bit on a tangent, but my main point was that when the communist regime relaxed a little bit, we had a lot more freedom than under a so-called. I don't even know what Canada or Australia or New Zealand. I don't even know what it is now, but it's a tyranny of some sort. But I don't know what to call it.
Well, if you explore that kind of Jungian ideas, the ideas of cannibalizing your father, eating the
Yeah,
dead body of your father, this kind of stuff, right? Instead of rescuing your father from the belly of the whale, or the stuff Jordan Peterson often talks about, there's a
yeah,
cannibalization going on. It's like people are living off the remnants of a great culture that was built, right? And
hmm
instead of continuing its construction, they're taking the
hmm
wealth that has been handed to them and using it to dismantle the very thing that created the wealth in the first place. And it's scary
hmm
because, and there's something going on in society, whether it's the Black Lives Matter movement, the trans movement,
Oh, yeah.
the
Oh,
the
yeah.
the radical feminist movement, which is deeply anti-Western values. There's something to it where
Yes.
they not only do they don't want acceptance, they don't want tolerance, they want the
They want dominance.
obliteration of their
Yeah.
enemies. and
Yeah.
and all of this has been going on, it's like a toxic soup of crazy making. Okay, that's what I call it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
if you say that Canada is institutionally racist without contextualizing it to the First Nations people, to say that someone who immigrates from Southeast Asia or Jamaica or wherever is going to be institutionally discriminated against in Canada is ridiculous beyond belief, actually, to state that.
Well, I know.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's
It is.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now, if you take the
Yeah.
context of the First Nations, and it's a different story. So what we have is like this soup of stuff that's been going on. I don't know. You said to the early '90s or late '90s, where you started to see this
Yeah.
kind of turning away from what
Mhm.
while you stand on the shoulders
It,
of giants, you
if I
criticize
could
them.
interrupt you just for a second,
Sure.
I am pretty sure that in my recollection, it started with the politically correct speech. So that would be 1989, 1990, 91, 92. I think that was the real first kind of major turning point where suddenly you had to be very cognizant of everything that came out of your mouth. I think
Hmm.
that was like the first starting point. But I
That's
mean, my
interesting.
question is, I mean, now we call it wokeism.
Yeah,
because
sure.
it's taken to a whole different level. It started as a good idea. It was like, look, if you can say something in a nice way, not to offend someone, then do
Sure.
it. Why not? And there's nothing wrong with that. But then it became, again, as Jordan Peterson says, compelled speech. Then you felt first it was societal. In other words, you felt compelled because there was pressure on you from others. And then it became law, right? That you
Hmm.
had to say it or whatever. You can't now in England. That's it's a indictable offense to to say or write something on Facebook that the establishment uh, does not condone, that goes against the woke narrative, and you're absolutely right, the feminine base of it, cops will be knocking on your door. What I don't get is I really don't, the degree of compliance on the part of not just compliance. Okay, forget compliance. The degree of enthusiasm, uh, which in Canada is something like, I don't know, 60 or 70%. And down here, it's a little bit less. People that think this is a great thing, that we are being saved from this killer virus and everything that goes on is temporary and we'll get our rights back, as if the whole idea that somebody can borrow our rights is even feasible.
Hmm.
Okay. But I mean, I don't understand. I mean, I write against it. I have friends who write against it. I have, my family. All my family's in Canada, by the way, in Ontario, and
Hmm.
and they all are against it. But yet there is a swell of the majority of people who are still 20 months later as scared as they were in March
There's an
2020.
explanation for that. That's
Okay, I'm
explainable.
I'm I'm all ears.
Okay, so Dr. Matthias Desmet, you could Google him.
I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
I, I,
and
I know
then
who he is. I've listened to him. I know his
and
lectures. Yes.
there's a couple other I can't recall their names right at the moment who have all danced around this idea. And here's what it
Yeah.
is, okay? There's a significant portion of our population, say 30%, okay?
Hmm.
That has no meaning in life. Okay. And when I
Hmm.
say that, that doesn't mean that they don't go to work. That doesn't mean they're not married with kids. That's not what I'm saying. They could be single or whatever. But the fact is, they can't make sense of the world. And they have something often described as free floating anxiety, or they
Yeah.
are, struggling to make sense of the world. Okay. They have no idea
Yeah.
why they exist. Perhaps they're atheists. Oftentimes they're atheists. And I'm not going to get into that. I think atheism is an illogical position to have. It's not logical to be an atheist. But anyway, that's a whole other story.
Okay.
But a lot of times they struggle with the idea of meaning. And so when you take those people and you say, here's how you fit in, and here's how you can contribute to the greater good, the greater cause, they can be literally hypnotized by this. And hypnotism
Hmm.
is the
Yeah.
wrong word because hypnotism
Yeah.
is
No, I
more
know. Yeah.
intense, but it's like a mass formation or something. There's
Mass
different words
formation.
I've
Yeah.
heard called it by this. And so those people can be manipulated very, very easily as long as they have clear rules that you have to wear a mask, that are easy to follow. You have to socially distance. And then they become religious about it, which is why you see this like sacrament of vaccination is almost where it's at now. They get religious
Oh yeah.
about it. And those people, that 30%, are the types of people that you would find in an angry Pentecostal cult. Like one person would be angry at non-members of the Pentecostal. I'm not picking on the Pentecostals here. I love you guys. But
Yeah.
like
No. No. Okay. I
that
understand.
literally gets angry at people that don't buy into the cult. They're there. They want people punished for non-compliance. Like that's how these people are captured. The next problem is that we have another 40% of the population, okay, that doesn't have this free-floating anxiety, okay, but is susceptible to incremental authoritarianism or incremental totalitarianism. And so, the rewards, the feeling of, I don't know what it is, like the serotonin burst you get from intermittent rewards or unpredictable
Yeah.
rewards,
Dopamine. Dopamine. You're
dopamine
talking
hit,
about.
yeah,
Yeah.
is much
Yeah. Yeah.
higher than it is for something that you get on a regular basis. So you get
Yeah.
more excited. So what happens to those people is that if as long as the mandates and the stupid rules are incremental, okay, and that they don't make any sense. Isn't that so weird? So the key is that 40% of the population that is rationally following these rules and kind of against them, but still going along to get along, they must be able to criticize the rules. So that's where you get these people on Twitter, journalists like, we should shut down the airports. Why haven't we done this
Yeah.
other thing? Or this doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense. They go along, and how they get through the morality of it, or the cognitive dissonance of the crazy making, is that they verbally criticize some irrational part of it. So it's very important in a psychological operation like this that you do things that make no sense.
No sense. Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
long as you
No.
continue to
Yeah.
do things
Yeah.
that don't make any sense, George, people that are following it will criticize a part of it that doesn't make any sense, and they'll feel like that's their contribution. And so
Right.
those people are very difficult to get to because they don't want to risk losing the football or having a beer at the bar. As long as they can get through with their stupid app or their little thing, their vaccine card or whatever they need, and they can still have a beer. Maybe they have to sit at a table. When they stand up, they have to put a mask on. This is so dumb. And they go ahead and verbally criticize it, and they think that is enough to get rid of the guilt or whatever feelings they have that the whole thing is stupid. And so that's
Hmm.
70% of the population, George. That's
Yeah.
70%.
Well, once again, I think you're definitely onto something. I know Matthias Desmet's work. I heard of him uh, maybe back in, I don't know, it was this year, earlier this year, just like many of us have, right? And so a smart guy, and definitely does something to it. I don't know that I don't. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant if he has the percentages right. I don't know that many people actually have the free floating anxiety. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
The
matter.
fact is that it doesn't matter. The fact is that this is definitely some kind of um, hypnosis or mesmerization. That because if it wasn't, you'd be able to get through to people rationally. And we now know, and I know that
Nope.
you can't get through to them rationally. Um, Now the other 40% that you mentioned, that again, again, we don't know the percentages. I can tell you that right in Florida, it's a much lower percentage.
Sure it is.
Okay,
Yeah, for sure.
Because and here's the thing. Um, Florida, the South of the United States. I've traveled eh, fairly extensively to Georgia and South Carolina. Not so much west of here, but Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, I have a good friend in all those places. The um, First of all, the religious basis. So right off the bat, you have a lot of people that will never lose that meaning.
Hmm.
Uh, they're just they're it's bred in the bone. Parents,
Sure.
grandparents, etc. Number one. Number two, just as important, maybe more, is the belief in individual freedom trumps everything. Okay. And the more you mock it, the more you make fun of it, the stronger you make it. So if you read in Washington Post, or on Twitter or whatever, there's a lot of people that mock freedom.
They
They
do.
you've seen it when they spell it, free dumb,
Yeah, for sure.
DUMP,
Yeah, it's
freedom,
out of control. Yeah.
so, and you go, and I, as someone born on the other side of the fence, think, are you, I don't want to use a, F
Sure.
bomb here, but are you insane? I mean, what else do you have? That's what you have. If you don't have that, you have nothing else. So the fact that you can make fun of it shows me that you're an idiot. Okay, you already like a priori stupid if you can say that.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, for sure. So down here, thankfully, we have a great governor, Governor DeSantis. But even in other states that their governors are not that great, but the people, plus they're armed, so
For sure.
so you're a little bit more afraid of them. And I have now read a lot of people, European acquaintances, not friends, but people that I know, friends of friends or whatever, who are starting to say, now I understand why the Americans are so pro-gun. It has nothing to do with a Chinese invasion. It has to do with a government invasion, and people are starting to get it. So anyway, so just to get to your
The
point,
Second
I don't know if
Amendment, the Second Amendment is the
yeah,
most misunderstood thing in the world. The Second
yeah,
Amendment is not designed so that you can protect your property. It's
yeah,
designed so
no,
that you can
yeah,
fight the government if you have to.
if you have to,
That's what it
absolutely.
exists. That's what it exists for.
100%. 100%, because the founding fathers knew that these things happened. They happen all the time. They happened in Europe during their time, and they're happening. I mean, they
Sure.
happened in 1999 in Yugoslavia. I mean,
Before we move
government.
on, I want to jump in
Yeah,
with you. So I mean, you talked about
sure,
the
sure.
compelled speech and the political correctness, or the idea that speech can be criminal, right? This idea of
Yes.
hate speech, or that so you
Yeah.
could say something so offensive or derogatory that you become a criminal. That's a
Hmm.
very slippery slope. Okay,
Well,
but
it is. Yeah.
what also concerns me is the attack on the jester. The idea that comedians cannot make fun, okay? Or not,
Hmm.
like you go Seinfeld would not be permitted today. You go
No,
back and watch a couple Seinfeld episodes.
which I do. Yeah.
Okay? They wouldn't let Seinfeld would be canceled in 2021
Hmm.
if you can believe that.
Hmm.
If some of the memes and jokes they would have on that show, very concerning, the tax on Dave Chappelle. The idea that the funny part is that there would be nothing easier to mock than the trans movement. I mean, it is so incredibly ridiculous, some of the things
Hmm.
that are going on within that movement, to
Hmm.
that are sad, but also, like, you're in within that movement, you go from the sublime, offering an 11-year-old girl the opportunity to stop her puberty, and change and take hormones to give to a man, from the sublime to the ridiculous. It's the most broad spectrum thing I've ever seen in my life. It is at the once absolutely cruelly criminal what they do to kids within that movement, and at the same
Hmm.
time so ridiculously hysterical at the other end. I can't even
Yeah.
comprehend it. We need the comedians to go in there and make fun of this, because
Hmm.
it that's how you let the steam out, and
Hmm.
people are very susceptible to humor. They're like, if you make people laugh at something, they laugh at it because it's true, and it
Hmm.
reinforces their own
in the in
questioning
the
of
in the
that.
immortal in the immortal words of Homer Simpson, right? It's funny
Yeah.
because it's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Just to interrupt you for 1 second, and I'm sure you know this. I'm not. If you want to know who holds the power in a society, look at who cannot be made fun of.
Hmm. For sure.
Right? That's that's. I don't know who wrote it, but it's a very
I
famous
think
kind
it
of
goes
quote.
both ways, actually, that expression. I think I would add to that. I would say, if you want someone who's truly powerful and full of integrity, they will allow themselves to be made fun
Yeah,
of.
absolutely. Yeah.
You see somebody that you do a spoof on them, and they laugh at it. I'll never forget when Dana Carvey did the George H.W. Not gonna do it. Wouldn't be prudent. Remember, I don't know if you remember that Saturday Night Live skit.
I do. Yeah, yeah.
and and the person laughing the hardest at it was George
Was Bush.
H.W. Bush. Yeah, he thought it was
That's right. Yeah,
hilarious, right? So
yeah.
people that are not capable of laughing at themselves are very dangerous people. Actually,
They
they
are. They are.
yep,
They are. But I think it's a very apt saying. You could find in any country in Canada today or the United States. See who you cannot make fun of.
hmm
And you will know immediately who's in power. Right. So if you make a joke about like a really like you said, Dave Chappelle, at the
sure,
trans movement, they hold the power. That's why you
yes,
can't make fun of them. They hold the power because then they exercise the power and they get people banned and they get people depersonalized basically. So
sure.
those are the people that have the power. And this was kind of once again something that was much less um, strictly enforced under communism. And now, your audience, and you have to, I have to make a distinction now. So there was the communism from the end of the war until 1963.
Hmm.
And then there was so excuse me, my bad. The end of the war until 1956.
You're talking about
Then
the
there was a communism.
Czechoslovakia. You're talking about
No,
Czechoslovakia?
no, 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 no. I'm talking about communism in general, and I'll
Okay.
tell you exactly what I mean in a minute. No, I'm talking about all, the Soviet Union, and all the satellites. So from 44, before 45, we're not going to talk about the, we need 5 more podcasts for that.
Sure.
But, from after the war to 56, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And then from 56 till about, the mid 60s, and then there was a tightening for 20 years, kind of went kind of back down, and then of course the explosion. Here is why I'm saying it, that you have to make that distinction. So in the first period, we're talking about hardcore Stalinism. Okay,
Hmm.
so hardcore Stalinism, there was no humor about anything. I mean, it simply wasn't. And I mean, it was a horrible period. And my parents survived. My mother survived Auschwitz. My father was not in a concentration camp, but he survived, the war. And then straight from that, they went straight into communism. In 1956, Nikita Khrushchev, who used to be a Stalin confidant, he was in the
Sure.
inner circle.
Yep.
In 1956, I believe it was. I can look it up. I think it was in February of 56. He convened the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and he stood up on the podium or at the lectern, and he denounced Stalin. Now, when I say denounce, he didn't use any terrible. He just said, "Well, some mistakes have been made." Comrade Stalin, he was obviously a great thinker, but there were some mistakes that were made. And people, now I was too little, I don't remember it, but it's just from history books. And there were people who were saying, my father told me, says when they heard that, they thought that Khrushchev would be dead the next day, but he wasn't. And that was the first kind of de-Stalinization. So there was a little bit of a relief valve, because now you could
Hmm.
say that Stalin wasn't such a great guy. Now, once you open the valve a little bit, right, and you can say Stalin wasn't such a great guy, well, maybe we can say that Lenin wasn't such a great guy either. So from 56 to about 1970, approximately, you had 14 years in all those satellite countries. I'm not sure about the Soviet Union, where there was much more humor permitted than we have now. Okay, so it wasn't like you couldn't go on TV and say the prime minister's an idiot or the party are idiots, whatever. But there were theaters and clubs, and little stages, and festivals where people
Hmm.
said all kinds of stuff and made fun of the regime. And it was tolerated because they were smart and they knew, oh, we're going to tolerate a little bit of it. It's a valve, and we can then, do whatever we want economically and everybody will shut up.
Hmm.
But we don't have that valve now. You can go on
Well, the
Twitter
phones have
and
taken away that valve. The ability to everybody to record everything is Big
right.
Brother's greatest tool, because
Yeah.
it really is. Because you can't really. You could have a comedy club, but someone could sit there and record it, and then they put it up on the internet, and everybody's laughing. And so, not only is the person saying it part of the problem, but everybody that's laughing is part of the problem. And so, there's
Yeah.
this instrument that the governments have been given of constant, total control and observing of the people and making sure that it's very, very scary. One of the things that was interesting about the period of time between 1933 and 1940 in Germany, and also in communist Russia for quite a while, or the Soviet Union. Um, and what's coming into our society, it's been coming into our society for many years, is these extrajudicial punishments that we've allowed,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So how the heck are groups of special interest groups, whether they be LGBTQ, whatever they be, how are they
Yeah.
allowed to take out people's careers, or to sabotage the Me Too movement's another one. The
Hmm.
how did it become that groups of people that don't like somebody are able to bypass the judicial system, civil and criminal court, and punish people way beyond the point of where they should be punished, with no court of law, with no assumption of innocence. We've abandoned all of our judicial, the no blind. Where's the blinder with the scale? It's all gone.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
people, they don't even need the courts. They don't need to go to court. They can just take you out. And it's these extrajudicial punishments. We had you have somebody comes along. I call it the Bill Cosby Harvey Weinstein dilemma. Okay, so if you ask somebody on the street, what do you think of Harvey Weinstein and Bill? Oh, same thing. Well, hang on a second here. Hang on a second. What do you mean the same thing? They're both Jabba the Hutts. Well, no, hang on. What did Bill Cosby do? Oh, Bill Cosby drugged women and raped them. Okay?
Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein engaged in transactional sex.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you don't like those two things? Okay, that's fine. One is a criminal offense, a very serious felony. The other, I don't know. And let me ask you this, George. Let me ask you this.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me ask you this. Is actress A, Angelina Jolie, or I don't know who else was involved with Harvey Weinstein, and all this sort of stuff, are they also guilty? Because what about the girl that didn't get the part because she wouldn't do that? You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah.
But you have this
you
have this conflation of these things into the same thing. And to me,
I know exactly.
How do we allow these extrajudicial punishments? And how come nobody says anything about this?
Well, we are. You are.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to do what we can, and I think that unlike many other of my peers, say on Twitter, I am more optimistic in that. I always say at a lot of my tweets, end a lot of my tweets by saying "truth shall prevail." Okay.
I've noticed that.
Pardon?
I said I've noticed that. Yep.
Yeah, you've noticed that. Yeah. So the sentence itself was coined by a Czech church reformer and philosopher in the 15th century. He was burnt at the stake in 1416, I think. I'm not sure, but beginning of the 15th century. And because he criticized the church and for selling indulgences, and he preceded Luther, and he's a big figure in Czech history, and the church gave him an opportunity to recant, like they often did, and he said, "Well, there's nothing to recant. I didn't say anything that wasn't true." Reminds you of something, right? All I said was completely true. Just like now, people put out, what did I say? I just quoted a medical article that was published in the Lancet. What did I do? And yet you're barred from Twitter. Well, it was a little bit worse than being barred from Twitter for him.
Sure, just a touch.
Yeah, that's just a touch. His name.
But that's the feminine nature of what's going on right now, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's part of the feminine nature of it. Yeah, it's interesting.
Do it. Yeah, the smothering, right? He was burnt at the stake, and the last words were, "Truth shall prevail." The exact translation from Czech is "truth wins," okay? But it's been translated as "truth shall prevail." And, I honestly believe it. But lies are fast, and the truth is slow. So lies, as Joseph Goebbels knew very well, are very powerful, and if you know how to use it, a very easy instrument to use. And they're fast. You repeat it for 2, 3, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 2 months. Bingo, you got it. All right? Truth is much slower because some people are convinced through logical arguments, but most people are only convinced through emotion. Logical arguments will do nothing. And the emotion can be ridicule, or it can be personal pain when it starts touching them personally, or any kind of emotion that you suddenly see it's touching you and your family in some way. Someone is mocking you. Somebody is actually uh, 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 revealing things about you that you don't want to reveal. Whichever way it may be, but that's the only way that people are convinced. And so, how did the truth prevail? It took 300 years or 400 years until at some point, I think in the 19th century or maybe 18th, that the Catholic Church realized that selling indulgences was a corrupt thing to do. And you might know more about this than I do, but there was a break. And that's how long it took when that particular truth prevailed. So I'm optimistic. There's a lot of movements all around the world now. And as long as the United States, I mean, Biden obviously is a disaster, and so is Harris. But if next year the the midterms are decisively, uh, 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 you know, Republican, although we can, debate Republicans, but if it's decisively Republican, I think that's going to be the turning point. Because if America falls, the world falls with it. But if America's, yeah, like that, just like that. But if America stands, then the world stands a chance. How it'll look and how long it'll take, I don't know. But I think that, you keep fighting your way, I keep fighting my way, and truth will come to light eventually.
I can't remember this thing. I like the word lie as the group term for a bunch of different things: falsehoods, white
Mm-hmm.
lies, attempts to deceive. Like I think that it's a family, and so I don't think lie is the right word. Like, what do you call it
Mm-hmm.
when Fauci comes out and says something like the new science? Like a lot of people hear that and they're convinced, oh, it must be new. What he's saying is that I was wrong. It's just a way of
Yeah.
saying, like,
Well,
how do
so it's a
you,
lie. I
it,
mean, okay. I'm
like
sure you know
that
who.
guy is a serial liar. Like
I mean,
Fauci like
yeah,
you
I
could,
know.
he is such a liar. It is preposterous that people don't see
Well,
this.
I don't know how old you are, Michael, but I was there in the 80s when Fauci was doing with AIDS exactly what he's doing now with this disease. The difference was that AIDS obviously was more confined and he wasn't able to wreak the kind of havoc that he's wreaking now. But he
Hmm.
tried. He tried very hard. Okay.
Hmm.
He sowed panic and fear,
He
and there
did.
were
Yep.
drugs on the market that he didn't allow. He destroyed careers of academics who said that AIDS may be perhaps acquired in some other way, because after all, it is the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome.
Hmm.
Anyway, we could again do 5 podcasts about that. But I remember Fauci from those days. I saw him on TV. Listened to him on the radio. I read articles that he wrote, and he's doing the same thing. I'm sure you know who Professor Mullis was, right? Kerry
Sure.
Mullis.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So you've seen the video where he says Fauci is basically a pathological liar.
Sure.
He doesn't know
Yep.
anything about, he has that line in that video where he says, you put something under electron microscope, and Fauci will look at it and will have no idea what he's looking at, right?
Yeah,
But
sure.
he will go out there, and he's a bureaucrat that's paid by the state, and he will bald face lie about everything.
Do
So
you think he's an architect or a puppet?
wow.
I can't decide with
Um,
him. I can't I don't know what
he's
Bill
more
Gates
of an
is.
he's more of an architect. Yeah, he's not in Gates's league,
Hmm.
but he's more of an architect. He's definitely a very powerful enabler, right?
Hmm.
In the right place at the right time. So that's more than a puppet.
So that 30% number, remember earlier in the conversation, I want to go back
Yeah.
to that a little bit. I know we took a detour away from it, but so there's 30%, call it whatever the number is, right? 40%, which would be the go along, the 30% religious cult members. The 40% is the go along to get along types. And then the scary part, so the 30% is often called the Nazi number because they only needed 30%, right? Totally
Mm,
convinced on their cause to take a
mhm,
whole
mhm,
industrial
mhm,
nation state and turn it into a war
mhm,
machine and a death
mhm,
machine. But then you have this other outside group, which is about 5 to 10% of people, and they couldn't
mhm.
care less what the narrative is. They're sadistic at
Right.
the core. They're sadistic at
Mm,
the core, and all they want is power and control.
mhm.
And I think Fauci's in that crowd. I don't think he cares about coronavirus,
No,
HIV,
no, no,
swine flu, whatever. He is a
no.
sadistic. So I'm a short guy, okay? Um, and Fauci, you often heard Fauci
This
called
for
short. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't know if
okay,
you know
no.
this. I think he's deeply bitter. I think there's something in him that is very dark and he wants to hurt other people. And I'm not kidding you at all. I think he's
Sociopath.
yeah, I think he's bitter.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's a sociopath. I just think he might be bitter, scorned, and malevolent to the core.
Hmm.
And that,
Hmm. Hmm.
and he doesn't care if he hurts people.
Hmm.
And I think Gavin Newsom's another one in this crowd where,
Oh
and
my
they all
God, yeah.
happen to be Democrats, okay? They're like most of the people that are in this group right now are Democrats, but the same thing in
Hmm.
something different could happen to Republicans. The same
Sure.
group hypnosis could happen or group whatever class mass formation can happen.
Formation, mass formation, yeah.
So the what is Klaus Schwab and how do you see these, like, I can't decide. There's a couple things I can't decide here. I can't decide if this was planned or if people are using it to push an agenda, or
Mm.
if the Americans, if not the American government, but Americans released it on purpose, or the Chinese released
Mm.
it on purpose. And how
Mm.
does it do you see this as really a conspiracy, or is it just continued bumbling incompetence?
We we won't know. I don't think that even though you're a lot younger than me, I don't think either one of us will live long enough to really know. Okay, because this stuff is really only known 100 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, but my feeling, it tends to be Occam's razor. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, the simplest explanation. Um, there is a German doctor that's writing on Substack, and he's anonymous for obvious reasons. And I can email you his handle so you can find him. Uh, and and he says this is the conspiracy of the mid-level bureaucracy.
Hmm.
So this is not a Klaus Schwab conspiracy. Klaus Schwab is just happy that it's happening, and he's trying to
Opportunistic
find
with it.
ways
Opportunistic.
opportunistically to hop on that toboggan. Okay.
Yes, sure.
Uh, but and on the one hand, on the other hand, it's not the Duck Fords of this world either. That
Mm-hmm.
but it's this huge army of the Faucis, of the Fergusons, of the Dorstens in Germany, whoever it is in France. Those mid-level people in the public health sphere.
Yeah, chief medical
If you look
officers. Yes, that
chief
yes.
medical officers. And if you look into their resumes, notice how many of them either are of Chinese descent or have ties with the Chinese educational system,
Mm.
or their institutions are subsidized by this, by the Chinese. And so all of those people that I just mentioned, Fauci, Ferguson, Dorston, and
Theresa
whoever
Tam.
it is, Theresa Tam. That's right, Theresa Tam in Canada. So those are the mid-level people who have, the Walensky in the U.S. It's
Sure.
another one, right? The CDC, and they have at their disposal a huge army. Like we don't even know. That's tens of hundreds of thousands of mid-level bureaucrats who set the tone and who set the policy. Unfortunately, they swayed even Donald Trump. If Donald Trump hadn't blinked
Yes,
in
I know.
April
Yep.
2020, we would not be having this conversation. I mean,
Nope.
I'm glad to meet you. Maybe we would have another
Sure.
conversation,
I agree
but
with
we
you on that.
would not be having this conversation.
Totally
He
agree.
blinked. He blinked. The reason, again, we won't know. Although, what's his name? Scott Atlas's book is coming out this month, and he will write. He writes a lot about what happened at the White House, so he knows a lot about it, and it should be out, I think, next week. So look out for it. Um, Basically, Trump, like everybody else, he wasn't afraid when it started. He was very confident, right? But then Fauci put the fear of God in him. Oh my God, Mr. President, this is going. Oh yeah, and very, very uncharacteristic for Donald Trump, who never in his business life he had never done anything like that. But he took it on trust. He took it on faith that this guy, he knows what he's talking about. Except he didn't. He was lying,
Yeah, he
right?
was lying the whole time.
And
Pardon my language. I hate to say it.
the
Beep
whole
it
thing.
out, Scott.
Exactly. Whoops. And from that point on, Scott Atlas came on, I believe, in October. It was too late. It was a month and a half before the election, whatever. It was way too late by then. Maybe September. I can't remember. So that's what happened. So anyway, that's the theory of this German doctor. He uses a lot of very credible examples. He's a very believable scientist. And of course, you listen to Peter McCullough and other doctors,
Sure.
and they all pretty much all agree that this is not some smoky room conspiracy, but it is kind of an avalanche that took on the uh, kind of the look of a conspiracy as it rolls on and on and on and on because there's more and more people involved in it, many more than we can ever control or even know about. So that's kind of my feeling about it.
This is where I think. So, Donald Trump, love him or hate him, respect him or disrespect him, whatever your opinion is on
Yeah.
Donald Trump, whatever movement he represented, he colossally failed that movement in April and in
Hmm.
March
Hmm.
2020. He was a colossal
Hmm.
failure. And, the right has failed to point this out to him. And the
Oh
left
yeah. Well,
is afraid. They know he did. They're afraid to point this out, and I don't know why. But if you're a Trump supporter and you're still a Trump supporter,
hmm.
I really
Hmm.
think the best thing for the world would be if Trump went away and allowed some other person like DeSantis or Kristi Noem or someone else in the Republican Party to come up. He's so toxic. Whether you love him or hate him,
Hmm.
he's very toxic. But nobody's pointed out the fact that he
Hmm.
totally, you said blinked. I say great. He opened if you're in our camp, he opened the gates to the end of America. That
Hmm.
was Trump who opened the gate. I don't care what anyone says. And
Okay. Well, I will. I don't know that I agree completely because I think that everyone, including Trump, including any leader, I don't care who it is, uh, can. I mean, i- i- Churchill. I mean, every leader can have a breaking point. If the breaking point comes in at the point in history where it's less crucial, it's okay, right? If it comes at a point
consequences
where it's,
matter.
well, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So he had that breaking point, and I don't know that I can, as a, uh, I don't know that I can blame any human being for having a breaking point. Now, you can say what you're saying, that's fine, and we can all have opinions on that, but that he was basically he was in a position where he was very, very frightened, and he let these idiots talk. Mind you, he changed his mind very quickly, but it was too late. You know, uh, why do you think that he's toxic now? I mean, right
Because
now.
okay, so I'll give you my quick and dirty on Donald Trump. Number one, he has a problem with insulting people. That's number one. He likes to insult people, and there's nothing
Hmm.
presidential or stately about someone who
No,
ascends to that
statesman
office
like,
and
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah.
can't stop insulting people, even if he hates them.
Hmm.
Okay. Another
Hmm.
problem is he has is he won't shut up. Okay, so there's a reason why you have a press secretary, bud. Okay, you don't have to go out there every day and argue with everybody every single day. Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't think Donald Trump, he's argumentative. He likes to insult people. He's arrogant. Okay, and love him or hate him, those things are true about him. Okay,
Sure.
he
Sure.
probably is clinically an egotistical narcissist. Okay,
Yeah.
and of
But
the
yeah.
overt variety. Okay, overt egotistical narcissist, totally arrogant. Um, he's constantly trying to frame everything as a victory for him. He doesn't give credit
Okay,
to anybody
Michael, I
else.
understand everything you say, but first of all, there's a
And
huge
I'm not
number of
even
people.
anti-Trump. I would have voted for the
No,
guy.
I know,
But
I know. Exactly. That what I was going to say is a huge number of people that love him just exactly for that, for the things you just pointed out.
yeah, but you
So,
don't lose if Governor DeSantis runs for president. You don't lose those people. They're still going to
but
vote
he
for
might be. Yeah,
DeSantis.
you don't. Well, I would, of course,
No,
but
everybody that would have voted for Trump will vote for DeSantis or vote for Christie or
yes,
vote
but I
for someone
think
else.
that
You already have those
the
people. You don't have
difference,
to worry about
the
them.
difference The difference is that, and trust me, I will be the first one in line to vote for DeSantis. Okay, so I mean, there's no problem. Or even the Texas guy Abbott, whatever.
Sure.
But the difference is that DeSantis is much more prone to be um, what's the word I'm looking for? To be influenced by the rhinos, by those Republicans in name only.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of them. And because Trump was an elephant in a what do you call it? What's that elephant in Toy Story or whatever it is? He was the kind of guy that just trampled over everything. But
Sure.
the positive side of it was that he wouldn't let any of these people until April 2020 affect him. But anyway, that's all in the past, and
But here's the other thing. A lot of people don't understand that Trump was aiming right at the pharmaceutical companies. He wanted to you go
mm,
back to listen to his speeches before the
mhm,
corona. He was going to
mhm,
hit that. So he
yeah,
set himself up. I agree with you that he was the first leader that didn't in the Western world in America that didn't come from the political elite class. That
mhm,
didn't come from that, which was interesting to
mhm.
me. And as much as people say Trump's corrupt, look, Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom, Joe Biden, these people are far more
They,
corrupt than Donald
yeah,
Trump
they
ever.
can.
You could just read a history of the Newsom family in California
Oh
or the
man,
Brown
uh,
family in California or
yeah.
the Pelosi family in California. These people
Oh
are so corrupt and
yeah.
self-serving. It's off the charts ridiculous, actually,
I have a I
compared to
have a
Trump.
question for you actually, if you don't
What's
mind.
that?
I have a question for you because I mean I live down here. I'm 2,200 kilometers away. Um, so in Ontario, uh, I mean, I remember when Doug's brother was mayor of Toronto, and he was
Hmm.
kind of the Canadian Trump, right? But I mean, what happened to people like Doug Ford, who are champions of the people and who are blah 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 blah, and they fold like a house of cards. They just and there's nothing. There's no
I think they're
fight in them.
being. I think they're being paid. I'll be honest with you. I
Ah,
think my belief is
by
that,
Big
and
Pharma.
yes, I'll tell you why I think that. Okay, I actually have circumstantial evidence that would point to that. Okay, the finance minister of Ontario's name was Rod. What was it? Rod Phillips, Scott? Yeah, Rod Phillips. So he was the finance minister for Ontario. Okay, and Christmas 2020,
Mm,
he's putting out live tweets. So there's tweets that you put out that are like you put in your scheduler and they go out on their own, and people kind of know that this is a scheduled tweet. And then there's live
mm,
tweets where you're like, "Hey, I'm on my porch. I got my maple syrup made right here in Northern Ontario, and I'm gonna put it on my pancakes and all this sort of stuff." Okay, so he was live tweeting from his home in
mm,
Whitby, but really
mhm.
he was in St. Bart's. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, St. Bart's is, I mean, I don't know how much he makes or how rich he is, but he's probably not that rich. Like that's not that's above Aruba. I mean, if you go to that, what's the cheapest? The Dominican and Mexico are the cheapest. Then you go up to like Jamaica and then Aruba and then
The
Cayman
Barbados.
Islands. Yeah, you kind of go up the expensive. And St. Bart's is up there, man. That's an expensive place to go. It's also a banking island. Okay, and so the finance minister of Ontario, okay, is there over Christmas. Doug Ford knows he's there. Okay. And he's doing the Zoom meetings where he's wearing a sweater while he's in St. Bart's. He's got the fake background of his house, and he puts on a sweater, and he's sitting. This is a pure covert op, okay?
Oh, man.
I want to know what the hell you were doing there, bud. And nobody brings this up. Like, what are you doing in St. Bart's, Rod? Like, what is it that you told everyone else not to travel, but you got to go on vacation to St. Bart's? So you're just lying on the beach all day? Or maybe you're setting up bank accounts, bud. Maybe you're setting a few things up for Dougie and yourself. You know what I'm saying? And I think, you know what? I don't think Doug Ford would be all that expensive. I don't think he's as rich as everybody thinks he is. I don't think Rod Phillips is that rich. I think you could probably buy them for $1 million each. Maybe Dougie be a couple million. Not that expensive. You got Eileen Davila, whose husband's a lobbyist for Pfizer or AstraZeneca. You got all this. The Trudeau family owns shares in Acuitas Therapeutics. These people are not wealthy people. Okay. And all they want is power and attention, okay? So what's interesting about politicians is how cheap they turn. That's what's always shocked me, is how little money it takes to, $50,000, $100,000. Yeah. Like they go so cheap. And once they've gone, they're captured. They're criminals now. You got them. So whether it takes $1 million or whatever, Doug Ford does not want anyone to know what Rod Phillips was doing in St. Bart's in December of 2020. I'll tell you that right now. Okay? So I think these people are paid off, and I think that, these, you know what I heard? I heard Pfizer's changing its tagline. Did you know that? They have a new tagline coming out.
No.
Yeah.
What is it?
Getting past our criminal past. AstraZeneca's got a new one too. It's this time's going to be different. I mean, these companies are so corrupt and criminal. Okay, these are criminal institutions. Pfizer, AstraZeneca,
Oh no, I know.
Johnson and Johnson. These people are criminals. And so the fact that how much does it take to buy off a Doug Ford, Theresa Tam? Not a lot of money, dude, in comparison to how much money they're making. So, George, it's quarter after. I got to go pick up my kids from school. Can we do it again?
Let's do it again, man. Let me know when, and we'll connect. I appreciate the chance to talk to you, and it was real nice. Hour well spent.
Yeah, George_JazzCat, folks. If you want to follow him on Twitter, he's got a Substack, GeorgeGrosman.substack.com. I hope I pronounced it right that time. Medium.com/@GeorgeGrossman. And of course, if you want to start a podcast, that's right, you sucker. I know you're listening to this. You think, I got something I can talk about. You know what? GetAGripStudios.com is the place to do it. We can do everything for you because I do lots of podcasts. I do 7. I don't know how many I do, Scott. I do so many podcasts. I can't take it anymore. If I had to do the production and all that, you don't want to do any of that. You just want to record and focus on content. And if that's what you want to do, go to GetAGripStudios.com. Thanks for listening.